Yeah, my name is Jarrell James. I think I've probably seen most of you at some point in my career. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the Internet Defense Alliance, and specifically, I'm here to talk to you about why it definitely needs to exist, and why we need to start thinking about the internet as something that should be defended from an alliance perspective. You can just, do you want me to, oh, do I get to use this thing? Nice. Okay, so let's just start, like, which dimension do you reside in is not really a question that ever applies to any kind of communication network. And when we think about the internet, we think about the fact that it brings us together, and it brings us into, like, a global hive mind, a global brain. Am I supposed to stand over here where the light is? And so the thing about that is, if you really are paying attention to the way the world is built, and the hierarchical systems that allow for access to the information, like network, the reality is actually it's a tool of hierarchy used to basically create different dimensions. And I can pretty much assure you that I do not live in the same dimension as you guys, wherein I live in a dimension where I have privilege, I'm here, I'm in this world, but my heart and my family and my culture and my background is in a part of East Africa known as Tigray, which just recently emerged from the longest internet shutdown in the history of humanity. And so from what I experienced in that and how I've experienced just the general cypherpunk community responding to the rise in internet, weaponized internet shutdowns is a wee bit alarming, and I'm trying to create more of an alarm for everybody to rally around, because the actual reality is that nothing that we're building for crypto, and none of this, like, whether it's ZK privacy tech, whether it is, any like privacy messaging, whether it's banking the unbanked, all of that depends on a hierarchical communication network that is not open and accessible to everybody. So it's pretty meaningless to the populations that we've claimed to be building tech and solutions for. I personally witnessed this over the last 2 years, where I saw, the start of the bull market meant a lot for all of us, but it also meant like the start of a war for my people. And then I watched Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of this stuff that used to be in their lives completely inaccessible to them. There's actually a really good BBC article on specifically Tigray's interpretation of Bitcoin after the war. So it's important to remember that you don't actually live in the same dimensions as other people on the planet that are on the internet. The internet is not a connection piece, but the evolved internet definitely fucking could be. And that is really where I think we think of the internet as an evolved thing. We think of it as like, damn, that is the pinnacle of mankind or humankind's technological combination with communication. And we have academia built from, the Middle East libraries like thousands of years ago. We've got stuff we're building on from the Renaissance. Oh, everybody can have access to it. But it's actually not true. This is a form of siloing information to privileged communities, and those privileged communities are then able to use that information. Now, if you are in a position where you're, connected to the internet and you want to figure out how to do literally any remedial task, like gardening, you can go on YouTube and you can learn that in a matter of minutes, maybe a matter of seconds. I don't know how familiar everybody is with YouTube. But the reality is that, like, when you're in a position of catastrophe and you're in a position of your communication network being shut off, all of those simple things that we've taken for granted are now no longer available to you. And the evolved internet says, well, we don't exist in hierarchy. We exist in, I have notes here, by the way, I just realized I should get back to. We don't exist in hierarchy, and it's never offline. And the format of never offline is something that I think that all of us have stopped at. We don't actually physically understand how to make a resilient communications infrastructure without, like, the support of DARPA or the support of the US military in general, without, like, telecommunications companies and legal policies in place and opening it up to, like, the World Bank and loaning people and loaning populations debt in order to, like, secure telecommunications diversity. This is why that should concern us. Like, we look at the way that telecommunications and internet access is brought to populations around the planet, and it's designed to completely leverage them. It's designed to, if necessary, shut them off. And we definitely know this in like the privileged, more Western world or developed world, as we might say. We kind of sense it. We sense that there is this market of attention being built around us, and it's like a gated, walled community. We're aware of that, but we aren't doing anything to build against it, and that is where we like need to really think about our relationship with hierarchy and the way we're building crypto products. Because like, if our relationship with hierarchy and the crypto products we built is under this, then the fuck are we doing? And so where we go from there is like more of a space of nomadology, which for those of you who are familiar with nomadology, raise your hand because that'd be cool. But damn, nobody. So there's a lot of things that we talk about. We say like the internet, right? We say, oh, wow, it's this global brain. It's bringing everyone together. But it's still based on a system of power that is, global capitalism. It is, there are these people at the top, there are these people at the bottom, there's a flow of information, and these people have more access to it. It isn't really built on what we would consider like the free and open access of borders even. Like travel is a really good example of what nomadology is. Where I come from, there's a lot of nomadic communities, and they exist in Sudan, in Eritrea, in Tigray, in Ethiopia, and they move all throughout. But there's people in all of our communities that are, genetically related to these nomadic people because we just like, hey, what's up, buddy? And so when we talk about information, you have to think about it as a concept of borders. The actual social order itself of the internet has to be something that is built on a resilient system that creates a dependency on nomadology, not on hierarchy. So for us to like model that, what does that look like? Well, if you think about nomadology, why are they always ridiculed? You have the Romani people, you have a lot of, back in the day, the Brahmins, and then you have a lot of communities that seem to get pushed to the outside. And the reason is because nomadology by its design is anti-state apparatus. It is something that takes a cultural value and says, I share this cultural value with these people, I share this lifestyle, I share all of these different totems of my life, and I recognize that as like base natural law. And so I travel within these ranges because my people have always traveled within these ranges. And that is a general challenge to the state apparatus. As borders become more closed, as all of these things have happened over centuries where they found reasons to persecute people, it has been anti-nomadology because there's a desire to use money and weapons and everything you can to create hierarchy. And so when we look at the way the internet is designed, it is not one of nomadology. It is one currently of access is relegated by political powers, by private companies in many cases, and it's not something that is actually open and accessible, so why should we be proud of it? There is a version of the internet that we can be proud of, and it is something that I think all of us in 2017 really bought into. It was this idea, there was definitely a collective effervescence where we thought about banking the unbanked. We thought about what we were gonna do and how we were gonna usurp the internet and the global status quo and the powers. And then a lot of us got rich, to be honest, and a lot of us fucking forgot about all of that because there was a lot of different things that happened, and we were able to take new narratives and then disassociate what was originally our charter, right? And so the reason why I personally believe that, it's nobody's fault really, is that we all collectively came to the same conclusion, that there is actually a fundamental infrastructure baseline that we're never going to usurp. And that is something that we can't no matter what Tornado Cash is illegal or illegal, like if you don't have access to the internet, the fuck are you doing with Tornado Cash? But actually, importantly to note, hardcore Bitcoiners are lightly in the nomadology world because hardcore Bitcoiners will argue that you can sync blocks by getting SIM card data across a border through what's called sneakernet type technology, which is really just people fucking running across borders for their lives with SIM cards hidden up their ass or some shit like that. And that is because they're trying to literally get packets of fucking information out of war-torn regions. And so blockchain as a whole is really positioned well to actually help out with nomadology. It's just dependent on a very annoying hierarchical internet structure, information highway in the way. So where we go from there? This is an excerpt from my manifesto. Our manifesto, my co-founder is Fatima Fanazadeh, and we are founded the Internet Alliance, Internet Defense Alliance. But this is an excerpt from our manifesto, which is circling privately right now. I'm not down to make it public because too many people are going to steal words and shit. So I think it's important to look at this and understand what I'm talking about. Is the evolved internet focuses on fundamental global infrastructure fail-safes, systems of resilience that ensure no single body or ideology can impose hierarchy of access to information. The general order is one of nomadology. The evolved internet can't exist in privileged pockets. It exists everywhere. The evolved internet isn't a garden of forking paths. As much as that's a great little metaphor, I love it too, guys, but it's not. Gardens have boundaries and agendas. It isn't a global brain feeding a central memory core of progress. Progress is subjective and very, very, very much controlled by the hierarchy. Like progress of whole micro communities, progress of large communities. This is stuff that is easily controlled by the internet. You can look at right now what's happening with France and the French protests. If you pay attention to the moves the French government is making in the telecommunications industry, they are trying to find liberté ways of basically imposing internet sanctions, internet shutdowns, slowdowns, and censorship, because they realize that like the whole philosophy of France is actually one pushing for nomadology in the internet, and they actually really wish people wouldn't realize that. So the evolved internet is what it must be, a new form of cockroach. And why I say the word cockroach is actually a little bit personal. During the war, and it's still kind of going on, but there is, my people live in very fortified like canyon walls, and maybe you've seen like the stone churches like chipped into the sides of canyons. That's us. We wear things like this, we climb canyons, we do that. But when the war was happening, everybody was so upset about the people of Tigray, and they were like, don't let them come back. They're always going in their canyons and they're hiding. They're like literal cockroaches. You have to kill all of them, right? And so obviously it's really hurtful. And when there's, 800,000 of you dying in 2 years, you really don't want to be called cockroaches and consistently. But if you give me something to think about, which is that the cockroach is actually the only totem or identity that can like innately survive catastrophe. We have this idea of the cockroach, and it's disgusting, but it's also the thing that we accept is going to be here when we're all gone. And so one of the things I want to talk about is that. How do you bring about a resilient internet that exists despite catastrophe and exists once you're already gone, and honestly, the whole world could be gone? That's you. That's us. The roach intrusion, which, by the way, in case you didn't know, a group of roaches, a colony of roaches, is called an intrusion. It's pretty sick. The roach intrusion erodes the internet of U1. This is the second excerpt. As privileged designers of communication infrastructure, we have agency to decide if we build for hierarchy or unfettered evolution. If choosing the latter, we implicitly reject the status quo of at least one state apparatus, potentially many. We become roaches, and by consequence, so does our work. We hide in every fissure of the communication citadel, perpetually spreading, eroding the hierarchy, and evolving the internet. So let's just like talk about one moment of that real quick. The micro fissure part is hiding in every fissure of the communication citadel. There's some, I don't know if any of you guys know Guattari and Deleuze, but there's some great stuff they have on the ideas of micro fissures and plateaus. And what we have to acknowledge is that like a microfissure is a community, and a community isn't just dependent on geographical location. There are millions of American citizens that families are definitively like in very high tense, war-torn areas, which means that they are connected to these micro communities over there around the world. The way that they interact with them is through the internet, the only way they interact with them. And so what I want you guys to imagine now is you're sitting here. Who here has family in other countries, like across seas? Everyone? Yeah? Okay, so pretty much all of us. Now, you exist in a world where you're talking to them regularly, you're bothering them, they're bothering you. And then you exist in a world where you try and talk to them and you can't talk to them. And you're like, all right, well, that's a little bit annoying. I guess they do live in Iran. I guess they do live in Tigray. I guess they do live in France during some tumultuous times. I guess they may be shutting down the internet. And you, as a person, we all are so used to the internet that we're actually fine with the drug being taken away for a little bit, just a little bit. And then it goes on for longer, and we get really fucking angry. And then that's when shit changes for us, and they're like, maybe we shouldn't shut down the internet. But what happens for other people who live across the sea is they don't have that ability. And in fact, they know the rest of the world exists, and now they don't know if the rest of the world knows they exist. There are massive crimes that are able to be carried out in darkness, hidden from the world. And it's important to notice that the hierarchy doesn't do anything about this for a reason. It's a lot easier to get you all to pay attention to the political stuff that's going on in your world, or to Ukraine, or to any other thing, if there's a really easy way to make sure that the biggest issues, or maybe more gruesome issues around the planet, are able to come to people in a tethered way, right? They're tethered to a narrative. They're tethered to a hierarchy. So we go from there and we say, this is us. We become inside the internet. We become the people, the builders inside of the infrastructure. And we look at this video and we say, okay, who are we then? We have to, from an innate, fundamental principle, build tools that do not build hierarchy. They build for unfettered evolution. When we do this, we are inside the citadel. We are inside the floorboards of the citadel. We continuously burrow. We continuously take over. And we actually recognize that there's a lot of technology out there that is capable of supporting a global infrastructure internet that is not dependent on telecommunications networks and not dependent on really any formal state apparatus. So when you do, you understand that you're the roach internet, right? And you have that roach in you. And then it's important to take that further and say, okay, is what I've built here and is what I see being built over there compatible? If, oh yeah, we want to collaborate, blah, 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 but what is your dependencies? What are my dependencies? And if we can create a roach backend, a roach infrastructure, and there's a lot of ways you can do it. I'll be releasing papers towards the end of fall because we're doing more private stuff right now. But this is kind of a good little AI interpretation of some of the options that are out there. You have to start challenging assumptions, and this is the most important piece. You challenge the assumption of what the internet fucking is. The internet used to be a high latency lagged experience. We moved fast away from that, which allowed us to say in the developed world, oh, I need a faster internet connection. I need it faster, I need it faster, I need it faster. We assume that since faster is what we are able to get, that there's no value in high latency. And what we got to start realizing is that there's incredible amounts of value in high latency systems. And that sneaker net systems, like taking a SIM card across a border to a place where they can upload the data to the internet. This is all like sneaker net technology personified, and you find ways to say, okay, well, if high latency is an acceptable value by these people, if high latency is an acceptable value by that community, then there's actually quite a bit you can do. And all you have to do is ensure that there's cadence systems in place that create a high latency, consistent cadence so that you can get information out of these places that isn't dependent on state apparatus. And so I encourage you guys to go to the internetdefensealliance.org, where we'll be making the papers public soon enough. I also encourage you to just look into Deleuze and Guattari's work. 1,000 Plateaus is a really great book, but if you look at it, you'll realize that a lot of what we're working on and what we need to build around the internet is actually been talked about in philosophy papers around information and libraries for a couple decades now. So with that, wow, bro, you don't have the emoji? So that's a roach emoji.